so there's a lot of experimental psychology work on social media, looking at the kind of putative links between social media and various psychopathologies like anxiety and depression. And the empirical
dysmorphia.
literature, body dysmorphia, I mean, pretty much everything. Like, I mean, there's literature on body dysmorphia, anxiety, depression, FOMO, is kind of association. Yeah, lots and lots. I mean, pretty much everything that can go wrong apparently is going wrong in response to this stuff. But if you look at the empirical literature, it's quite an unclear picture. So there are various papers that claim to have found like a strong link between, or at least a correlation between social media and, say, for example, depression. And for every paper like that, there's another study that claims that these links aren't actually there, and that this is correlation, not causation, and all of that very well-known stuff. And so what I was trying to do, what I thought was missing actually was a kind of theoretical framework for thinking about human technology interaction that actually made contact with those layers that I was talking about a second ago. And so the kind of impetus for the project was to provide that in a way. And I thought that predictive processing is particularly good for that.
To set up the problem, definitely in the world around us, we have kind of seen this rise, and and you say like it's almost really paradoxical and surprising that there'd be so many kind of problems. And you can try and look on maybe explain on an individual basis. Okay, they're having this body dysmorphia there, and there's depression here, but then why the sort of aggregation of all these different kinds of problems? And Mark is nodding. So maybe dive into that.
This is kind of the interesting reason why drawing on something like a predictive processing framework is relevant for uncovering some of that, because not only do we have a unified theory of cognition, so that's pretty interesting, but it becomes completely non-surprising that all these pathological outcomes are comorbid with social media use as soon as you appreciate the fact, and potentially the fact that you are a prediction machine. The way you work, the way you thrive and are well in the world is that you are generating a model of how things change and move over time, especially relative to your interaction with the environment. And the better that model, the better you feel and the better fit you make with the niche. I mean, the better we're able to predict the real statistical invariance, like the real way that the world works, the better we are at being able to feel at home in the world. Okay, that's the take-home message. That's the big take-home. If you are a prediction machine in a volatile environment, what it means to feel at home is that you've got a good solid grip on how things work. Okay, for that kind of system, which is primarily an epistemic system, it's trying to get a grip on how things really are in the world. That is its bread and butter. That's how the system earns its salt here. Okay, is it figures out how things really are in the world. That's what it's for. It's what you're for in a way. Okay. Then systematic dishonesty and systematic breach of real world invariance is completely poisonous for us. Like as a system, like if you are built to get a good grip on how things work, anything that inundates you with bad evidence, like Instagram, that's just giving you bullshit after bullshit, it's just a systematic lie factory that people take to be real. And even if you, the agent, is like, no, I know it's fake. That's why I'm safe from it, even though I'm scrolling 7 hours a day. Just for anybody who's listening to this, if that's you, that's not true at all, okay? Just because you, the agent, knows something doesn't mean that the system at large isn't picking up belief, isn't altering its belief networks relative to that. I mean, the good example for that is placebo effect, right? So we all know placebo works. But did you know that, if I take you to a hospital and I introduce you to my buddy who's wearing a white coat and has a stethoscope on and is shaking a bottle of pills at you, and I say, that's an actor, that's not a doctor. They don't know anything about medicine. If they tell you the medicine will work, it will still work. The placebo effect still works. Why is that? Well, because the agent level is just the shallowest part of the predictive dynamical set. The rest of the system is going, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck. That's a duck. If you're in a hospital and they have a white coat and they have a stethoscope, that's enough predictive evidence for the outcome to be relatively sure, there's a high probability that the pills that I get in that situation are going to be the ones that are impactful. Same thing with social media. Even if you're like, oh, I know it's fake, if you're being shown image after image after image there are filtered and staged, your system doesn't necessarily know that just because you know it. And so we are bending our own generative model away from true invariance in the environment. No wonder we get sick, because we're built for that.
Yeah. Just to kind of emphasize, just to add to that, I think one of the kind of catchy taglines for predictive processing is that your conscious experience, I forget the actual phrase and it's escaping me, but your conscious experience is essentially a construct. It's a controlled hallucination.
Controlled hallucination, exactly.
That's the one. Yeah. Essentially what that means is that the way your experience of the world, your subjectivity, is constructed through and constituted by your expectations. And so if you're that kind of system, then the evidence that you consume from the world really matters in a very deep way. And so social media, we argue in the paper, is essentially a bad evidence generator, or I should say it can be a bad evidence.
That's better.
It isn't necessarily the case, and it's certainly not true for everybody. But in these cases where social media, for various reasons, and we can go into that, becomes this kind of bad evidence generator, it can act as a kind of crowbar that prizes your generative model out of sync with reality in a way that we think, hypothesize, can cause these instances of psychopathology. And I just want to bring attention to a study that supports something Mark was saying there. There's some work by Marika Tigerman and colleagues, some experimental psychology on body dysmorphia and content on social media. And what they looked at was the efficacy of applying essentially warning labels to doctored images. So it was an app that would, whenever somebody looked at an image where the model had been photoshopped or it had been staged, a thing would come up essentially like a kind of warning on cigarette packets that would say, this isn't real. You're viewing something that is fake. It's been constructed. This isn't a veridical representation of the human body. And what they found was that over time, this had like no effect. Like it was just absolutely useless at kind of ameliorating the kind of negative feelings that people were having. And I think this is like a stark demonstration that even if you know something's not real, even if you know that your Instagram or TikTok feed is just completely misrepresentative of reality, there's a kind of real sense in which that doesn't matter. And so I think that really speaks to just how dangerous this can be under the wrong circumstances.
Right. I mean, and I guess what I wanted to pick up on one thing though, which is that there's a kind of tension here I'm feeling, which is that if social media, if we obviously noticed it as being completely absent and disconnected from reality, there would be nothing salient about it. There would be nowhere in which to get our system going, right?
No,
so there's what is it?
Yeah. No,
so what is the middle ground to, why are we connecting to it, but then why is it subverting that machinery of our cognition in the ways it does?
Yeah, two things there quick. One is just because you know a thing doesn't mean the system knows the thing. So the system is still thinking it's getting good evidence. And the second thing is it's the reason that we're fascinated by it is the same reason we get fascinated to anything that's addictive. It's setting up cues that we're hardwired to be tracking. So if it's showing us beauty standard stuff, I mean, we're tracking that as salient already as kind of social animals. And we're already vulnerable to this because what it's doing is you have very smart people coming straight out of very good schools being bought up by these companies. So for just this reason, if you're attracted to beauty as part of a social tracking, and you're given filtered images, even though you know it, it's still making the system act as if it's catching better than expected evidence for the way that, for encountering beautiful images or encountering sexual images or whatever it is that we're going after. So even if you know it's false, the system is still being rewarded. And in particular, it's designed for that. It's designed to capture that in particular.